What's up, everybody? It is Wednesday, Conscious Tea at 11 a.m. every Wednesday. Today we're talking pitching yourself, and we're bringing on two specialists. We're going to talk about networking, what type of networker you are, developing a networking goal, and we're bringing on Ro and Lorna. And so I'm just going to wait for them to tune in, and then I'm going to call them together. Hey, Ro. Hey, Chris. Excited to share business tips with you guys. You know, at the Conscious Kitchen, we cover all kinds of topics, but Laura and I are big advocates on just sharing as many resources that we can. So great. So we have our two guests here. We're going to call them in. Hey, Lorna. Hey, Ro. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
How are you guys?
Good. Good. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, where are you guys located?
We're both. Lorna, you can tell. Where are we?
We're in the northeast of the UK. The
Oh,
sunny.
nice.
It's
Yeah.
fabulous. Yes.
Awesome. Well, yay. We got some inter country going on here then. So I'm over here in LA. So I'm excited to chat with you guys. Today we're going to be talking business resources, networking, pitching yourself. And so if you could just give a little introduction to our followers and just who you are and what you're going to be sharing with us today, that would be great.
Cool. So my name's Ro, and I'm one of the co-founders of CutClass, and we provide tips, tools, and strategies for entrepreneurs, business owners, or business professionals. And my expertise is in networking, and my business partner, Leslie, her expertise is teaching people how to get out of a 9-to-5 to full-time freedom. Lorna?
Okay, so yeah, hi, I'm Lorna, and I am founder of Vibrant Thinking. So I help organizations and teams to thrive in the new hybrid way of working, so the future of work, and changing the experience of work for the better.
Amazing. That's great. And Lorna, can you tell us a little bit about what you will be sharing with us today?
Yeah, so I will be kind of doing networking from a team point of view, and some of the myths of networking that people have about that it's just for individuals or sales teams and things like that.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. Yeah, so we're excited to just jump in and dive in with you two pros and networking. I am also a big networker. You know, I'm a freelance consultant and I do a lot of my own networking, but I definitely think you guys are the pros. So I'm going to do this Q&A style with you guys and let you kind of run with it and interject with any questions. For any of our followers that are tuned in, please leave any questions you have either in the comments or in that little question bubble over there to the right side. And so let's get into it. Ro, if you want to start off with, I guess, telling us about the different types of networkers.
Yeah, sure. So when people go out into network, one of the things that one of the misconceptions is that, you know, networking may not specifically be for them because they see somebody that may be like the quintessential networker where they can just talk to anybody in the room. But that's just one type of networker. And there's actually 4 different types of networkers. I like to break them down into 4 categories. One being a shark networker, and like a shark is kind of like that typical salesperson that you would see. Sometimes people are a little like put off or afraid of sharks because they're just very sales driven. And they're not people to be afraid of, they're just people to be aware of and understand. Like when you see that person, you're like, oh, they must be just a shark type networker. And the second kind of networker is what I call a penguin. So a penguin type networker is a person that you'll see at an event and they will probably stick with the same person the entire time throughout an event. And
Cute.
it's kind of like a penguin, right? A penguin
Yeah.
finds like one mate or typically finds one mate for their entire life. And so that's kind of like the penguin networker. There's nothing wrong with being that type of networker. It's just a style of networking. And then the third type is a bee. And so a bee is that person that'll fly from like group to group. Audrey's saying, that's me. So a bee is a type of person that goes from group to group and they're like pollinating each group. They're like bringing that goodness from each group. And then when they go back home, they also think about like, how can I pollinate my existing network from the people that I just met? And hi, Nadia. She's a bee.
Awesome.
So that person was what we sometimes will look at and be like, oh, they're such a great networker. And that's, again, it's just a type of networker. And the last one is a lone wolf. And that's a person that really prefers that one-on-one type communication and connection. And sometimes people, when they run into a lone wolf, they'll think, oh, they're not interested, or they're really not taken to my conversation. And it's just that they prefer to have one-on-one conversation and maybe not be in a room full of people. So that's kind of one of the first things I like to kind of educate people on when they go into networking is, hey, there are 4 different types and none of them are right or wrong. But when you know like which one you are, it's so much easier to kind of walk into a room and know it's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because you see other people's networking styles, and you're like, wait, I'm not buzzing around the room like that. Like I'm doing this, but it's you have to embrace like who you are, right? Because otherwise, it can be difficult to make yourself fit into a box that like you aren't.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And you'll like start judging yourself, like I'm not good at it. They are, when really it's just your type of networking. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so is there any way that the type of networkers tie into what Lorna does, like in terms of it being like a team sport?
Yes, Lorna, absolutely. Lorna, can you explain how like the 4 types of networkers can like really come together to dominate in a team situation?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things here. First of all, like different types of networkers might be more at home in different types of networking situations. So like the B, I mean, you might have to correct me if I'm wrong here, Rochelle, but the B would be very happy going into a room, completely open networking, chatting to people. Whereas somebody like a penguin, and I'm a penguin myself, is much more comfortable actually if there's a bit of structure to it. You know, there might be a bit of networking, but actually most of the meeting is more structured and somebody running it. So it's about making sure, if you're working from a team perspective, about making sure you're sending different people to the kind of networking events where they feel most comfortable in, rather than forcing them to go to somewhere where they're like, I can't, you know, that's my absolute worst nightmare.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And so, Ro, there's a question here. Can you be a combo of types? Oh, you answered it, but
yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, you definitely can be a combo. So like, for example, like a penguin can float into like being a bee, dependent on like the situation. Or like you're not going to see a lone wolf hop to be like go into being like a bee or a shark. It's just not gonna like work for them, and it probably wouldn't make them very happy. But yeah, there's definitely like you can fluctuate between the two, or you can even like flex your muscle in one area to kind of get to a different like type of networker. Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. And this is a little bit I don't know, maybe hippy dippy, right? But last week we had the revolutionary women, and they were telling us about like for women in particular, when like they're in different parts of like their cycle, there's a part where there's like a masculine phase, you know, and that's like when you're down and you're ready to make things happen and you're working hard. And I wonder if that also could tie into like networking too. So like almost like different phases of like the month, you're a different type of networker. Because I know I'm definitely more of a go-getter during certain times, and other times I'm like, oh, I don't want to go anywhere. So it's like just a little interesting tidbit to kind of just like toss in there.
I love it. Yeah, I really loved those guests too. They were so good. The topic was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And so for anyone that wants to tune into that, that's on, that was episode 9, and that's on our IGTV. Today we're talking networking, building your network, and also how to pitch yourself, and networking as a team sport. So we have Lorna and Ro here, 2 amazing pros, and we're just diving right in. So if you guys have any questions, definitely drop them in there. And yeah, so then let's move on to the next thing. So finding out what your networking style is. Do you have any particular tips on defining yourself?
Yeah, so I think that comes down to like understanding like that joining a networking group is one form of networking. So typically when people think about networking, they're like, oh, I gotta go into like a hotel lobby and there's gonna be everybody wearing like 50 shades of navy and it's going to be like uncomfortable and whatever. And it's like, No, like that's just one layer of networking. And like networking can totally look like that. But networking can also look like just connecting with people.
Mm.
It can be, you know, if somebody's delivering your like takeout food later, instead of saying thank you, you can just connect with them and be like, hey, how's your night going? How's your shift going? And it can be looked at as just connecting with people instead of like thinking you need to actually network at like some like formal event. It also can look like reconnecting. So, for example, if you haven't spoken to somebody in a really long time, which there may not be a particular reason why you don't speak to that person, and these people are sociologists called dormant ties. So, let's say, for example, Liz and Lorna, you have like a person from college or your former career or job or whatever it is, and maybe you just lost touch with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't for any particular reason. Life just happened. Maybe you got married, or like me, you moved across the world,
Mm-hmm.
and that relationship went dormant. So what you can do is just reconnect with that person and open the conversation to figure out like, hey, what's happened in your life? What's happened in my life? And that relationship is actually so much more valuable than meeting a stranger. And the reason being is because just because your relationship went dormant doesn't mean like your life and their life went dormant. They've gone on to create interests and
Mm-hmm.
new friends and new passions. And the gold in there is that you don't need to build that know, like, and trust factor with a stranger because you're already friends with that dormant tie. You just
Mm-hmm.
need to strike up that conversation again. So when you think about your style of networking, you got to sit back and go, would I rather reconnect with somebody? Would I rather connect with a stranger? Like, what does that setting look like for me? How will that fit my style of networking? And don't think of it as just going to a formal group to meet strangers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think we all have that. When we think of networking, we think of like you said, like those big rooms that everyone's like, oh, you gotta like network, and it's like almost like those dates. What are those? Those
Like
dates that you
speed
go.
dating?
Yes, like speed dating. Exactly. Exactly. And sometimes networking can be difficult because if you do go to events like that, they can feel very much, in a way, sometimes forced. You know, like people are like forcing the networking, and you're like kind of like forcing connections. But you know, it's now times are different, right? So it's what are some ways to network now in the digital time, right? So now that we're not going to conferences, we don't meet people as easily. You said we can reconnect with the
Dormant ties.
dormant ties. Are there any other recommendations that you have?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, you know, social media is also obviously, as you know, Liz, like you're big like on social media. I love it. I see you all the time.
Oh, thanks.
Um, you know, there's so many different platforms that we can get involved with, which we all know about. But what's really interesting was in 2011, there's two sociologists that did research on social media, specifically Facebook. And so what they noted in 2011 was there was like I think I forget what it was, how many like millions and millions of people were on Facebook. And what they realized is all the people that were on Facebook, there was a between the like connections between people, like say for example, from me to like, I don't know, like some random person, it only took about 4 introductions to actually meet that person. And it could have been anybody on Facebook.
Yeah.
Then they ran that study like 5 years later, and Facebook's population got to over 1 billion. And they thought like the length between the connections would get longer because like the like community got bigger, but they
Yes.
noticed that like the connections between people actually got shorter. So
Wow.
when you're thinking about like using social media to maybe reach out to a cold contact,
Mm-hmm.
just realize that if you're on Facebook, this is specifically for Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
you are within 4 introductions of anyone in 1 billion person community.
Wow.
Like that's bonkers to think about.
Yeah.
So anybody that you really want to meet, if they're on Facebook or probably on any other social platform, like you can meet who you want to meet. Obviously don't go cold calling in the DMs, but that's an alternative way to network.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've definitely, sometimes there's no other way, right? You just
Yeah.
kind of do what you have to do and just go into those cold DMs, like you said. Lorna, so I know you're working on the digital tech side of networking and just team building. What kind of tips do you have? Do you have any other additional tips than Ro mentioned for networking digitally?
Not necessarily digitally, but I think the one thing with teams is that you don't actually know who each other's friends are. Just, friends that people see every day within their community. I think it's worth spending time saying, does anybody know somebody within our team that does X, Y, and Z? Because actually it's amazing who people do know, and you wouldn't I think people kind of have a thing like, these are my friends. It's one box, and then this is all my business networking. And particularly if you're working for an organization, that's, I think people quite often pigeonhole. So it's worth just spending time just together, saying, these are the people that we're looking for. Does anybody have either this person or these kind of people in their friend network?
Yes. So just putting aside any fear that you have of just hitting up your friend and being like, hey, I'm looking for someone that does this. Do you know someone that does that? And just putting yourself out of your comfort zone. 'Cause sometimes we don't want to ask people for help. We want to I want to do it by myself. I want to find someone by myself, or we just don't think of our friends that maybe they have someone, but we all know someone that does something. So it's just connecting those dots, right? Like you both said.
Yeah.
Totally.
And what about you, Liz? Because I know what do you love most about connecting with people on social? Or do you have any tips for people connecting on Insta or LinkedIn?
Yeah, I use Instagram for a lot of connections. A lot of my connecting comes through there. I have LinkedIn, and I go through there, and mostly my LinkedIn population is all the people that I've worked with. I knew the value of LinkedIn from when I first, had my first job out of college when LinkedIn started. And so along the way, I've been adding everyone I interned for, every job, every boss I ever had. So I've had this little network of people that I've worked for there, and it's such a great place to tap into. So when I'm thinking about something, I'll just kind of go into their DMs and I'll be like, oh, happy anniversary at your new job. And I think just those little pings of, hey, don't forget, I'm this person. They're good little alerts to remind people that you're out there and that you exist, and to not lose that connection, because at this point it's been 10 years since I had my first job out of college. And in those 10 years, so much has happened. Like you said, passions have developed, so many different experiences have come, and it's really easy to lose those connections with those people. But some of my bosses are amazing marketers, and they have amazing jobs now. So whenever I can, I just pop into their thing, and I'm like, hey, congratulations, oh, whatever I can. So that's a tip. Stay active on your LinkedIn and just see, because those little alerts on their work anniversaries come up. If they got a promotion, those little alerts come up. So just pop in there and just drop some comments. And then networking through Instagram, I think it's just being authentic, and just reaching out and being proactive about keeping those communications going, and commenting on their stories and sharing their posts. I think that really adds value to a connection when you're trying to connect with someone via Instagram. Sharing their content, they see that as supportive. And so they want to be like, oh, well, you're doing this for me. Oh, how can I help you? And I think that's a great way to solidify connections via social media and even those cold connections, right? It's just sharing their content, commenting on their posts, letting yourself be seen on their page is so important. Just being like, oh, this person keeps popping up. Oh, okay. And now I'm like, oh, hey, now I'm in your DM.
I'm here.
So yeah, those are kind of my top tips.
I love it.
Yeah. So up next, I guess we could talk about networking goals, right? And setting networking goals.
Yeah. And I love Lorna's take on this too, but so networking, of course, if you're networking for your career or for your business, you want to set goals. And I think one of the number one mistake or top mistakes that some people make when they go into networking is not having goals. And oftentimes the result is that person or that business will say, oh, networking doesn't work for me, or I don't really like this networking group, or I'm not going to reach out to that person because it's just they don't know what they want out of it. And just because you want something out of networking doesn't make it a dirty experience. And wanting something could be like, maybe you want information. Maybe you're just searching for a particular like piece of knowledge. And then in some cases, maybe you are looking for an introduction. Maybe you are looking to to meet somebody, right? Like maybe you are trying to pitch to somebody, but your goal for networking doesn't necessarily have to be like revenue generating, right? So if you have goals going into networking, it makes the whole experience so much better. For me, when I moved to England, one of my first goals was to understand how business was done here. Like business in England is done so much differently than business in America, right? So I needed to learn the culture first before I could actually meet like clients and stuff. So it doesn't always have to be about the money, but of course that should be one of your goals as well. Lorna, what about you?
Yeah, so I certainly think from when you're thinking about it from a team basis, again, most people think it's the sales team of an organization or the salesperson that needs to be out there networking. But actually it should be all members of the team if possible. And there's so much rich information that you can get from there in terms of having a finger on the pulse of the kind of like the challenges that you as a business are facing. Is that something that others are facing as well? And kind of picking up ideas of how to overcome them, kind of listening to trends that are, listening to trends that are happening. It could be for recruitment as well, getting out there and meeting different people. If sort of, thinking actually that person is somebody just to keep an eye on because she will be so right or he'd be so right.
Yes.
Learning different ways of doing things, because I think we all get so tunnel visioned into kind of like, this is the one way of doing it, this is how we do it. And sometimes just having a conversation and somebody saying, oh, why do you do it that way? Or saying we do it a different way just makes you think, why haven't I thought of that? Like somebody, it just takes somebody from the outside. So I think it's although it's not specifically bringing money in, as in sales, you are getting value from it in terms of you can get ideas for overcoming challenges. You can get ideas for new ways of doing things, which are all, means that you're spending less money, arguably, or less time. There are all benefits. So I think for me, it's much more than just a sales opportunity. It's really about using it to be able to see round corners for your business, and I think that's a really important thing to have. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. So when you're setting like these goals, right? Is a goal as easy as something like I want to accomplish, do you want to set goals for like I want to connect with 5 people, or do you want to set a goal for I want to accomplish this particular task with these people, or can the goal just be like, what are your tips for creating those goals?
Yeah, so I guess it's definitely relative to your to where you're at, and whether it's your business or your career, right? So I just coached a client today, love Nancy, she's awesome, and she wants to actually pitch to a particular client. And so when we're focusing on like a particular client, that's where we go into like research mode. And I'm looking, and I coach my clients to look at it from like 360 degrees. Okay, where can we actually find an entryway and an entry point? So we get very strategic in that manner, right? Because that's something where I don't need to coach her to get past the like, I need to reach out to somebody, I'm nervous to do that. Like she's past that. It's like, how can I actually get in front of this person? So that's like one way you can look at it. And then the other way is like, well, I need to start by reaching out to my dormant ties. Great. If that's where we're starting this week, I would say you can make a list of like 5 dormant ties that you want to reach out to. Make that list and then literally start ticking that list off one a day, Monday through Friday. And that could be your goal. So I think it should be something that's like attainable and not something that is so like earth shattering that if you don't achieve it, then you start to feel bad about yourself. So I think it's really just about like, what can you do, what's realistic, and what can like move your personal growth forward with networking, as well as what can move your business forward with networking that in that particular like day or week.
Awesome. Yeah. So set those realistic goals for yourself.
Totally.
Like only we know what we're really capable of. So it's like if you're gonna say, oh, my goal is to get like, I don't know, 20 sponsors for this like project that I'm trying to do, and it's like that's a big goal. And so
Yeah.
maybe write down your goals to almost like in a way to build confidence, like looking at like, okay, I'm going to use these goals to like help build my confidence and make them like attainable. I feel like that's like a good way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Lorna, I really liked, and I liked one of the things that like Lorna and I had talked about in the past, and it was like networking doesn't have to be done equally on a team to reach a goal for it to be like fair. Because sometimes like you can have team goals too, not just like for your personal like, business, but as a team. And then sometimes people think like the most vocal person on the team or the most boisterous person on the team should get more credit because they're doing the actual like speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But Lorna has a really great way of breaking that down on like, it doesn't need to be equal.
It doesn't, yeah, because that's just one part. Actually going to the networking events and talking is just one part. And, there's lots of work in terms of identifying the right networking meetings and also, most importantly, the right people to be talking to, depending again on your objective. And often the right person to do that is not the person who's networking, because personalities wise, they're not interested in detail generally. So, and there's also then opportunities in terms of once you've been networking, kind of following up the people that you've met and building that relationship. And again, it might not be that person is the right person to do it. So that, again, you're using the strengths within your team, somebody into detail, looking people, researching them, doing research basically. Yes. And then you've got the person going to the networking, and then you've perhaps got the next person who's the relationship builder on a long-term thing. So it's all, it doesn't have to be, again, networking is perceived as being that one moment when you're in the room. There's actually a lot more to it, and everyone can play their part and play to their strengths.
Yeah, that's so true to think of it like breaking it up with a team. Because I know like when I'm going to email someone that I haven't really connected with, like I spend so much time stalking them.
Me too.
I'm like on their LinkedIn, I'm on their Instagram, I'm like anywhere I can find out. Like I'm like, okay, everything I need to know. So I can write that nice hard hitting intro that it's not just like, oh, hey, I'm just another random person reaching out to you. It's like a nice tailor to that particular person. So it would be so helpful to say, okay, I'm going to do all the research here. You take on actually emailing them and then just kind of passing it along that way so that it's not just all set on the one person that's trying to make that connection.
Yeah. And probably, it's not just the work, the amount of work, it's also the kind of work, because if you don't like doing that research, if you get bored by doing that, you'll probably think, I'll just wing it. And then you're not actually making the most of the opportunity. Whereas if somebody else will love doing that, that would be their idea of like, God, I could spend all day doing it. So why not visit that person, and pass it on, as you say, through up the chain.
I think I cut out.
Yeah, you guys froze it. I think we all kind of froze a little bit.
We were like this.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. Yeah, because for a lot of people, like, they're not their strengths. And so identifying your strengths within what it is that you're trying to accomplish with that project is so important. Like, I love to do research. Like, I love stalking people. That's just kind of one of my things. I mean, using the term stalking for lack of a better term, I'm not really a stalker. But yeah, so identify your strengths, see if there's someone that you can build a team with, or if you already have a team, just do it in that new type of team. Networking is a team sport, which I love that like tagline. So it's a great way to just think of it. And so for anyone new that's tuning in, hi, we're the Conscious Kitchen podcast. We have Ro here and Lorna, and we're talking about networking. Next, I think we're going to kind of go into how to pitch yourself. We're going to talk about pitching yourself. And so we're the Conscious Tea. We're here every Wednesday at 11 a.m. talking about all kinds of different things. But today we're talking about business and just giving you guys those tips to propel your business or yourself or your project to a different level. So Ro, I'd love to discuss now pitching yourself. So what are the different ways of pitching yourself?
So, well, I think one of the best things to like the number one thing to start with is who is like your ideal customer. You'll hear like that term ideal customer avatar being thrown around. So you need to understand like who is your ideal client or customer. So because if you're trying to speak to like everybody, then you're not speaking to like no one. Like you got to speak to like one particular client or customer first. And then also like what problem do you solve for them? And you don't necessarily, it also doesn't need to be a problem. It could be a need, a want, or a desire, right? Like Netflix doesn't solve a problem for me, right? It's entertaining, right? So I wouldn't say like, oh, I'm totally like wanting Netflix tonight. Like, no, that solves like an entertainment like need. It's a need for me, right?
Yeah.
So I think understanding like the problem that you solve for them is like kind of like step 2. So who's your ideal client or your customer? And then what is the problem that you solve for them? And I think that's kind of where you get started with understanding, okay, how can I pitch to them? And then tailor like whatever your product or service offering is, tailor it specifically to that person. And I think like Liz, you hit on it really well where you're like, if I do a really great job of stalking and it's like, yeah, you need to find that one person, literally their name, like where do they work? Who is it that you're trying to meet? And then tailor something specifically to them. If you're pitching in the DMs, you better make it like really great. And you might make yourself visible ahead of before you send that DM. Just think about like when you receive a DM cold call, someone's cold calling.
Exactly. Oh no, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
You cut out.
Someone was calling me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you cut out.
Sorry,
if you could just repeat that.
Oh, so just think about like when somebody slides into your DMs like super cold and you're like, whoa, like bit much. So I think just doing like your research to tailor like your pitch to like in like a DM is like super important.
Yeah.
Lorna?
So
Yeah, I think it's, again, I think the point from a team point of view is, again, who is the right person to kind of maybe write the pitch and do that kind of work, which isn't necessarily the person who delivers it at the networking event. But I think it's really important, as Rochelle said, of like having one ideal client in mind and really understanding what problem it is you solve. And that's much more difficult than you think it is. From some of the experience, like you think that's easy to write, but actually it can take several goes. I would just say bounce that off as many people as possible until you get like people immediately getting what it is that you are offering or the problem that you're solving.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's definitely a good note. And so so you said, Ro, talked about value, and then did you talk about like story and being like relatable?
Yeah. So a really great way to like, usually like people when they go out to network or they're meeting a stranger, even if you're reconnecting with somebody, a dormant tie, sometimes people will always ask, well, not sometimes, they always ask you, so Liz, Lorna, what do you do? And you're like, what do I do? Like, well, I know what I do, but like sometimes you can actually answer that question in 7 different ways. And I won't go over all 7 because I'll keep us here all night. Okay. But a couple of really great ones is to be like a storyteller. And people love to connect with stories. And oftentimes when people answer the question, what do you do? People say their job title. Yeah. Like, for example, like if somebody teaches English online and someone's like, hey, what do you do? That person would say, oh, I teach English online. Well, that's great, but that doesn't really paint a picture of like what you actually do for me to connect with you and to keep that conversation going. So a better way to answer that question from the person that teaches online, they could say, yeah, I teach English to children in China. Last week, I also traveled to Korea. I traveled to Vietnam, all in the matter of 2 hours. And I really love teaching children online and connecting with families across the world. So that's a better way to answer the question, what do you do? And the reason why is you're giving a little bit more context into why you love what you do. And you're talking about traveling to like different countries from your home. And it just really opens the door to people to keep that like conversation going.
Yes.
And of course, being relatable. What if that person that you're speaking to has children? What if that person has a connection with like online like learning, right? So telling a story about what you do and not saying like what you do is like much better to pitch yourself if that question comes up.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I just learned that because I feel the same way whenever someone asks you what I do. I'm like, and I just say whatever comes to mind. But like telling them a story is such a better way to really like reel them in, right? Just reel them in with this little story, be relatable. What about sometimes people, their stories are too long and they're just like, oh my God, just tell me what you do.
Oh my gosh.
What's like the right way? Like, is there a balance?
Yeah, I think it should be within like it should be pretty succinct and like quick, like 2 or 3 sentences. So, you know, in one of my a good way to think about it is um people like what do your customers say? Like what is one of their common things that they say?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a second business where I teach parents to put their babies to sleep independently and on their own in their own room. So what I say is, oh, like I am a child sleep consultant. I'm usually connected to parents that say, oh, I was up all night with my baby. And you can, and like that, like quick connection can tell people exactly what you do. You solve people's like big pain point of being up all night with their child. So if you can like talk about the like common things that your customers say, it really can resonate and be relatable to the person you're speaking to because they probably have heard that themselves.
Awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so just I guess sit down and think about what you want your what is this? It's kind of like an intro, but it's like your what do you define this as? Like when you're going to answer when someone says, "Oh, what do you do?" and this is your I guess yeah, it's just your introduction.
Yeah, like an intro, like a quick,
Yeah.
like succinct, like intro. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess sit down and define what your intro is and what you want to, how it is that you want to say it, what you want to showcase and storytell. Okay, so we have a question here. Let's say, yeah, so paying attention to someone's cues, and sometimes people want to hear more, and then if you feel like, you know, they're kind of like looking away, looking in other directions, maybe you're like, all right, maybe I stop talking now, and you ask them about that instead. That's a good tip. Thank you. Lorna, do you have anything to add to?
Just on that last point, I think the other thing you can, if you're part of a team, is you know what, you can practice it with team members.
Yes.
See, you know, so you can see whether people are like, gosh, stop talking now, or like really wanting to know more. I mean, you know, ask people to be honest.
Yeah.
And say, do you know, those first 3 sentences, that was fine, but you know, you don't need any of the rubbish that came after that. Just stick to that first one.
Yeah, and so I think practice always makes perfect, right? And then I think to add to that, no, even doing it digitally. So if you want someone that's better at writing emails than you, and you're trying to get better, but just being like, hey, could you review this email and let me know what you think? Like, is it too much? And so really using your network and your team.
Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely.
Very cool. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about. Did we talk also about teaching something and like a catchy job title?
Oh gosh, yeah. So
Yeah.
for example, you can teach something as well about what you do, and it's particularly useful for people that may be in like an uncommon industry. So for example, like let's talk about, for example, if somebody like teaches a business to add like a digital course as part of their business, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if that's like what they do? And people are like, well, what the heck is that? Like you teach people to add a digital what? Like, I don't get it. So that person can, when they're asked like, well, what do? You can say, oh, well, I teach people to be a part of the e-learning industry. Like I take their products on as part of the e-learning industry. Did you know, and this is where you teach them something, did you know that in 2019, the e-learning industry was at like 189 billion, and by 2025, It's going to be at 350 billion plus.
Mm-hmm.
And I help my clients get a tiny sliver of that industry. And that is like, oh, okay, that's super cool,
Yes. Yeah.
because you're teaching them something about what it is that you actually do and the industry that you're in. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like your job specifically. It could just be the industry that you're working in that piques their interest.
Awesome. Yeah. That's a great, that's a great tip. Lorna, did you have anything to add to that too?
I don't think I do on that.
Cool.
I think, yeah, no.
Nice. I had a follow-up question. It popped into my mind and then it quickly went out. What was it? Darn, I don't remember. Sorry.
It's okay.
But Ro, so what about like if you're pitching yourself, right? So like you're an individual, you're a freelancer, you want to get you want it, or you have this like this self-employed type business. How can you showcase and storytell and also just give like that teaching something? So would it just be relating to like what you've done, like so teaching them on something on that you've done yourself, or would it be still within like the industry that you're trying to like pitch yourself to be in?
I think we froze again.
Oh, I know, live. This is the tech difficulties of live. Did you hear the question, or should I repeat?
It was like, I think like if you're, I think it's something like you're a business owner and like, how do you pitch yourself?
Yes. Yeah. So how do you pitch like your own service or your own individual? So if someone is like, a graphic designer and they're like really trying to network and look for clients, how can they pitch themselves in a way that might be successful?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like leaning back on work that you've already done. Like your previous work speaks for itself. So being able to talk about what you've already done, clients that you work with, success stories, and just sharing it. If that's kind of like the mellow way of like, you're sharing with people. But if you're actually going into that strategic mode, like I was talking about my client earlier, Nancy,
Yes.
like she has a bit more on the line. So she wants to land that client.
Yes.
So that's a bit different. So that kind of takes it up a notch, right? That's where you have to actually kind of put your like big boy, big girl, big they pants on and really like go for it. And you have to have that like solo conversation in your head that's telling you, oh, that person doesn't want to hear from you. They're not going to want to take your email. They're not going to want to take your call. You got to quiet that conversation down and really like go for it. But you have to understand that you need to put the time and the research in. Get your stalking cap on, like stalk that person, stalk that business, and figure out who the decision maker is so you can like be a little bit more aggressive with like getting in front of that person to pitch to them. So it's kind of like two ways. You can be soft about it, but then you can kind of punch it up a level if you're like really hungry to like network and pitch yourself. Hopefully that like answered that question.
Yeah, definitely. Just trying to think of anyone that might be tuning in and just other questions that they might have. So if anyone has any questions, please drop them in here. We have a few more minutes here of our discussion. And so we're talking about networking, pitching yourself, and we have Lorna and Ro giving us all the pro tips on all the different ways that you can accomplish the things that you want to accomplish for your business, for yourself, for your projects. And so I guess we could get into next, unless there's somewhere else you want to take the conversation, Ro, like a list of like the type of different clients that exist.
Different clients that exist, like that I coach.
Yeah, so like whale clients.
Oh, yeah. So this is good. Lorna's really familiar with this too. So it's really important to like break up your like ideal customers or clients kind of into 3 buckets. So you always want to have like your whale client, like that's that really big client that maybe comes like once in a lifetime, right? Like Liz, I'm sure you have somebody on like your like dream bucket list that you really, really want to work with. And probably the same for you, Lorna, right? There's somebody on that list that is your like whale client. And you know that if you were to bring that in, like that would probably like bring in like 6 to 7 months of revenue, like amazing. Then you'd have like a tier down from that, which is like, your brag about clients. And those are clients that you might land 2 or 3 times a year, but you know that it's like attainable. And then you have like your clients that keep your business going. Like those are like your clients that you know you can churn out work for them. That's like keeps you going from day to day. So being able to like break those clients down into like 3 buckets is really important when you're networking, because when you're in conversations, like if I'm speaking to you, Liz, or I'm speaking to like Lorna, I can break those break those clients down and know that my clients that I work with all the time and I know can bring in revenue for me, they're realistic for me to talk about in conversations because I know I could get those clients. But if I'm focusing just on that whale client all the time, when I go into networking, like I may not get that client, and then I'm like distraught and upset about it. So if you have different categories for your clients, it makes it a little bit easier and more realistic when you go into networking in a network setting.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lorna, did you have, I know Rose said that you also know a lot about these particular, like the whale clients, if there's anything you want to add?
I guess it's, again, it goes back to objectives. And if you're in a business, you might have, different objectives depending on throughout the year, and the needs of the business. And it may well be that the whale client is something that you just do all of the time. It's like never a top priority, but it's something that you're always wanting to build on, because that's the client that you need to be it's the consistency that's important rather than the focus. Whereas the kind of like everyday clients, that's the ones that those are the ones you should be perhaps targeting more in networking objectives, short term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, we're coming close to the end of our live. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for your time. If is there anything else that you want to add that you didn't mention for Ro and Lorna? Anything you want to just continue to add? If there's any value that we didn't share yet?
We talked about a lot, I think.
Yeah, awesome.
No, I don't have anything else to add. Just if anybody wants to learn more tips and tools, you can listen to my podcast called Allergic to Small Talk. Awesome. I have a podcast episode drop every Thursday. I'm just talking about tips, tools, and strategies to grow your network. Lorna was actually one of my podcast guests a couple months ago. It's a really great episode, so tune in to that. Yeah, and that's basically, it's what I have to share.
And Ro, your networking guide too. You have a networking guide.
Oh yeah. So I do have a networking guide. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll probably see my crazy self doing like reels and being weird and crazy.
Yeah, I love those. Yeah, those are great.
There is a free networking guide you can get. Just go to my link tree. It's in my bio. I also have a course. It's called No Agenda Networking. It's launching on Monday, where it's 4 modules, and I teach you from start to finish how to network and how to get in front of clients and how to generate revenue for your business through networking.
Very cool. Yeah, so definitely check out. We will tag Ro and Lorna here when we share this video to IGTV. So those resources will be there, but definitely check out their Instagrams, and the networking guide is in your link in bio, right? Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah. Lorna, yeah, and is there anything that you wanted to share?
So a great opportunity to network, I guess, if you are looking to go to hybrid working with your organisation, is there's a speaking event. There's an event happening on the 12th of May by Management Today that I am speaking at, as well as some great other people. The Chief HR Officer of Unilever and people from various other companies, but there'll be a networking opportunity, as well as hearing from people about what the future looks like for work, can't speak, and how to make it so that everybody can thrive.
Awesome.
So that would be it from me.
Awesome. Well, and give these ladies a follow. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Tomorrow we're going to be on Clubhouse, and we're having a similar discussion. So if you want to get more involved in the conversation, since Clubhouse is more it's more interactive, please check us out there. I'm going to update our link in bio with the event, and we'll be there at 9:30 a.m. PST. Oh yeah, 9:30 a.m. PST. I'm getting all my times mixed up.
And 5:30 London time.
5:30 London time. And so we'll have more of an interactive discussion tomorrow. And there we have our Conscious Kitchen Club, and we're there every Thursday at 9:30. We're here on IGTV on Wednesdays at 11. So we always have lots of programming for you. I'm sure we'll have more discussions with Lorna and Ro in the future for you guys. And definitely check this out and reference it in our IGTV. Next week, we are launching our season 4 of the Conscious Kitchen podcast. So we're so excited. Me and Laura have been working so hard. She's taking this week off and just doing some stuff here since she's in LA. So I'm filling in for her. But we're super excited, and we're releasing an episode 30, and it'll be with the Unbiased Science podcast. It'll be on all things COVID vaccine related science, side effects, just a real deep dive into scientific COVID vaccination, everything you need to know. And so, yeah, look out for that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Ro, Lorna.
Thank you, Liz.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
All right, we'll see you guys soon. Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
day. Get to those networking skills. Bye, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye.